Well, I would say I don't want people to lose faith in the organic label, but I do think that people need to pay attention to it and tend to it a little, So I don't think we should stop buying organic product, but I think we should be trying to support, paying attention to what types of organic product we are buying. And so that is the role that Real Organic Project plays. I would also stand by all of the products that we certify as Vermont Organic Farmers too. So.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I'm Linley Dixon, co-director of the Real Organic Project. We're a grassroots, farmer-led movement with an add-on organic food label to distinguish organic crops grown in healthy soils and organic livestock raised on well-managed pasture, all without synthetic fertilizers and toxic chemicals. You just heard from Nicole Dehne, the certification director at Vermont Organic Farmers. VOF is an agency that inspects organic farms to ensure their compliance with the National Organic Program on behalf of the USDA, and they are one of several certification agencies today that will not certify hydroponic production as organic. This is going against the National Organic Program. They adhere to the Organic Foods Production Act of 1990 as the law is written, requiring organic crops to be grown in healthy soils. Nicole and Dave Chapman talk more about this group of high-integrity certifiers, their position on hydroponics, and plenty more. Nicole was on the first Real Organic Standards Board about 7 years ago, and she is a long-time, highly respected voice in the organic movement.
Welcome to the Real Organic Podcast. I am talking today to an old friend of mine, Nicole Dehne. Nick?
Thanks for having me.
It is great to talk with you, even with all these scary cameras around.
Yes,
so,
they're very frightening.
I know. I know. So you are, what is your title with Vermont Organic Farmers?
Sure. I'm the VOF director, so the director of Vermont Organic Farmers. We're an LLC owned by the nonprofit Northeast Organic Farming Association of Vermont.
Great.
And that's an important structure to us and sort of influences the way that we approach certification.
Yeah. I of course was there when it was formed.
Right.
And it was a big decision about whether it was going to be part of NOFA Vermont or a standalone. And I actually leaned towards standalone, but I was convinced, because at the time the farmers were strong, and there weren't a lot of us, but we were strong and we had a lot of passion. Mm-hmm. And NOFA, some people from NOFA said, if you are a standalone, it's going to kill NOFA. We need the synergy.
Right.
And so we didn't want to kill NOFA. We believed in NOFA, so we became a part of NOFA. I wanted a group that really represented organic farmers, mm-hmm. which, was what Vermont Organic Farmers was. And it started as a certifying group. It was long before the USDA. What year was that?
1985, I think, was when it started. And it's interesting that you say that about it being its own entity, because I think my understanding of it is that it sort of tried to walk the middle ground. So when it was created, there were bylaws that were created for VOF. And when I look at those bylaws, what the impression I get is that farmers wanted to have some control over how the certification process worked and the certification decisions that were made. And I think that feeling has sort of been maintained, at least the idea of that farmer voice should be a part of the process. So that was a really important piece that you all built in the beginning, and we still work to achieve that today. It's an important value for us.
Do we remember how many farmers there were in that first year, part of certified by VOS?
Well, I thought there was some contention over who was the first organic farmer. In Vermont, I'm not going to name names.
I've never heard that one.
I heard that there was some contention, so they didn't want to give somebody the number 01 or something like that.
Oh,
but
yeah.
I think that there were. I feel like I don't have the expertise to talk about this, but I think that there were around 12-ish.
Yeah.
And there was something About when certification first started in Vermont, they were using a different organization. And then we formed Vermont Organic Farmers. The farmers formed Vermont Organic Farmers. And I think that was officially in 1985.
Was that Joseph Dunsmore? Was that other organization? I remember he was buying greens from a lot of us. And he said, we got to make some certification.
Right.
And that was kind of the impetus for it. Yeah. So it was, and how many are certified now?
Now we have close to 750.
And what has the peak been?
The peak has been just under 800.
Right. Okay. So there's been a little drop off.
There has
of
been
about
a little
50
bit
farms.
of drop off. Yep.
And the last couple of years been rough.
The last couple of years, we've seen a little bit of a decline in our numbers. And when we look at the reasons why people are dropping their certification, it's not because they're going conventional, it's because they're going out of business. So basically, what we certify small, diversified operations, and what we're seeing is those are the operations that are really struggling. Those are the businesses that are really struggling, and so we're seeing them go out of business. Yeah. And that's affecting us because those are the people we work with. Right.
I know that it's been a rough 6 years for organic dairy farms in Vermont.
Yeah. So our organic dairy numbers we were close to 200 organic dairy farms. I think we actually exceeded just over 200. And then now we are like at 120 something. So we have seen a huge decrease in our numbers there, which is really hard to watch.
Yeah. Why do you think that is? Was it always impossible to make a living in organic dairy and those people just hadn't found out yet? Or has there been a shift in the market?
No, I think there's been a shift in the market. So people were feeling like they were able to make money and it was profitable. And when I say that, I think it was making a living. It wasn't like, getting rich.
Right.
But the cost of production for those farmers kept going up, but their pay price, what they were receiving for their milk, was not going up. And in fact, it was going down, and there were quotas that were established where it meant that people couldn't produce more than a certain amount of milk. And that's what has made it so that it's really difficult to be profitable. And those farms are technically going out of business. It's interesting now because suddenly the milk market is opening up and these buyers are looking for new organic dairies. And so we're starting to see some new organic dairies get certified and the price is going up a little bit, but things are so unpredictable at the moment with tariffs. People had been talking that the cost of organic grain had been going down, but I think, it's very uncertain as to what all those costs are going to look like with these new tariffs and such, so.
All right, well, we'll get back to organic grain in a minute, but I'm curious, do you think that the price was depressed? So the price was good not that long ago, like 2017?
2017,
People were doing well, and
great.
Small farms were able to make a living, not get rich, but make a living. And other small farms, conventional farms in Vermont were going, maybe I should go organic. It looked like they were going to. And then the thing tanked. And why did it tank?
Well, that is a complicated question that I can only speculate as to the answer.
I would love to hear your speculation.
I think that that there is this consolidation in the industry, which is making it much harder for small diversified farms to make any money. So even now we've been seeing the number of organic dairy cows on each farm going up, right? So like over the years, you could make a living on 30 milking cows, and then it was 55, and now it's 75. So they've had to increase the amount of milk that they're producing in order to make a living, right? And there's also, of course, been interest from large corporate farms that have gotten into organic that can produce milk at a lesser cost. And I think at that lesser cost is a sacrifice for, the quality of the milk and whether those cows are being, pastured, and probably more importantly, that it's like a family farm that's operating the business, right? So it's like moving from a family farm to an industrial farm business that's producing the milk.
So when you say large corporate farms are moving in, are they moving into Vermont?
No, they're not moving into Vermont, right? So
you don't certify any
don't
of these
certify any
farms
of
that are
those.
putting everybody out of business.
Right, but we feel I think the impact of those farms because the buyers are choosing not to purchase milk from our producers and instead buy milk from producers where they can get the milk at a cheaper price. Yeah. I just think it's impacting the price overall, right? So it would be interesting to think about whether there should be a cost of production per region, because I think it traditionally has cost more to produce milk in Vermont. And I'm not sure of all the reasons why that is, but that's what I've heard anecdotally. And so maybe there should be a price that New England producers get to accommodate those extra costs. So
yeah.
I don't think that was a very popular idea, but maybe, I don't know.
Well, I think it's a popular idea. I actually believe that organic milk, when people go to buy organic milk, I think that they believe that they're getting milk from a farm like Butterworks or Larson's.
Yeah, that's the tragedy, is that I think the dairy farms and all the vegetable farms that we have in Vermont are what consumers expect when they think about an organic vegetable or an organic dairy farm. A family-run farm, small, someone who really cares about the environmental impact. All of those pieces are what our producers are doing, but they're the ones that are really struggling to make ends meet.
And including some truly excellent farmers. I mean, it's not like, you're inefficient because you're in Vermont and you're not very good at it. These are really bright people who are, I would say, pretty sophisticated business people and very good technical managers. But they're playing by different rules from those large farms you're talking about. Their animals live on pasture all summer, right? And that's not the case of the other large industrial farms.
Or, those in large industrial farms, they might be meeting the pasture rule, but the pasture rule is 30% dry matter intake over 120 days minimum, and they might just be skirting by meeting it.
So it's still not what we would call, the animals aren't on pasture for the summer.
Right, so even though they're meeting the rule, or it just looks different, right? Vermont, we can grow grass here. That's one thing we do really well. But if you have an organic dairy farm in Arizona, I don't even understand really what that looks like, right? So I'm sure that there's obviously areas that you're going to be growing pasture there, but it's going to look a little different.
Okay. I just think it's an interesting thing where I've just been reading Small is Beautiful, an old book by E.F. Schumacher. It wasn't old when he wrote it. It came out in the 70s. And the subtitle of it is Economics as If People Mattered. And he's trying to understand why it is we keep choosing things that actually make us unhappy, that are not good for people. But our economic system has a bit of contempt for people's welfare and has a lot of celebration of people's profit. And I think we're trapped in a bad dream. We don't know quite how to break that trance. So I think this is a perfect example where not only do people like the farm, the lifestyle, the animals, the much better animal welfare, these small farms, the way that the people who are working on the farm are treated, but they also want the food that's more nutritious, and it is more nutritious, and you can test for it and prove it, that comes from those kinds of farms instead of the large confinement CAFOs.
Right. It does seem like if we put agriculture in the same system as a factory, that is the cheapest way to produce food. And you're right, we're going to get cheap food that way. at what cost, right? So it doesn't seem like that model can work for agriculture if we're looking for producers to produce food in the way that we want to see it in an organic way, right?
Right.
The two don't seem to be able to meet.
Yeah, well, I mean,
Right.
I don't think that the food is the same, of course. That's
Right.
what you're saying.
Right.
That the cheaper food is worth less.
Yeah.
And so you might end up saving a little money here, but you pay it at the doctor's office or the hospital.
Yeah.
Or, you know.
Well, I was like reading this article about a pork operation in I think it was Korea, that they were actually growing, raising pigs in a building, right? Like it had gotten to that degree of like taking the animal out of the land in its natural setting, because that would be potentially the way you could do it the cheapest, but like at what cost, right? As far
Sure.
as the right.
Well, not just in
Environmental
Korea.
and health,
Yeah,
right?
also in Iowa and North
Right.
Carolina
Right.
and
Sorry, it was like
Pennsylvania.
a skyscraper.
A skyscraper.
Right, so that was
A
what was
big
really
skyscraper,
fascinating about it.
yeah.
But it's that idea of, right, of that's the cheapest way that we'll produce food, but not the way that we want to do it.
Not the food we
Right.
want to produce. Yeah. All right. Nova, Vermont. First, let me just share Sam Welsh's words of high praise for VOF. I once asked Sam. Sam is the director of OneCert, and somebody who has very high standards of integrity in the certification process. And I said, this is a long time ago, I said, Sam, what do you think of VOF, Vermont Organic Farmers? He said, VOF is the very best, except for us. I mean, we're right there with them. He said, and then the further you get from them, the worse it gets. I thought that was really interesting, and I think it's true. I think that there is a geographical thing that for whatever reason, the Northeast, I don't say this out of any, kind of my country, but I think that there's not very much big ag money in the Northeast.
Right.
And that's why it's not corrupted here.
Well, yeah. What I was going to say is, when I've heard that before, I've heard you say that before, I've heard other people really praise VOF. And the analogy that I've used is it's like we're teachers teaching A+ students. So like the reason that we have integrity is because the farmers have integrity.
Right.
So it's easy for us because we don't have people pushing on us. The farmers themselves want to do the right thing, believe in the system. And I mean, this does get to a little bit of what I think that we might be missing in certification is, I think we're only going to get so far if we think of certification as purely regulatory. I think it has to be hand in hand with education. So like, we're only going to get so far regulating people to do the right thing. We have to like convince them that this is the thing that they want to do and it makes sense for their farm and it works for their business and all of that piece. And that is the piece I think that's powerful about having a certification agency connected to the nonprofit, right? Because the nonprofit piece has traditionally been the education side.
Yeah.
And so I think when we have certifiers who don't have that education piece, that's an important piece that's missing. And we've even struggled with it ourselves and had to sort of go back to the education piece and say, we need more of this.
Yeah.
But I think that's missing from the USDA piece too, is that we got really hung up in the beginning about we are regulatory only and we can't do any education piece, and that's not how it was started in the beginning, right? It was all about learning and education and support of each other, of farmers. And so that's the piece that I think that is here in Vermont that we really benefit from too.
From the education,
education,
from the community
the learning,
building,
yeah.
the learning, the movement.
Yeah, the movement.
The movement, yeah. And it's interesting, it seems that the National Organic Program, the USDA program that is assigned to organic, we're not quite sure they're going to exist anymore, but we'll find out. It seems that they really wanted to separate education and regulation, certification as a regulatory thing, as essentially a business transaction. And, you know, this debate goes back a long way. I interviewed, Patrick Holden, who was one of the early people, the second generation in the Soil Association. And he and Lady Eve Balfour had a conflict around this very issue. And Peter Sager, who I just interviewed, also was right there with Patrick. And they were called the Young Turks. And they were right the same time that we were starting. And they wanted certification because they were trying to figure out a business, the creation of a business system whereby they could make a living. And a lot of the older guard were lords and ladies, and you know, they didn't really see it so much as a business. They saw it entirely as a movement. And Lady Eve said, you know, if you do this, then this is going to become a business and it's going to be corrupted. And they said, if we don't do it, it will never grow and it will never have any impact on the country and on the agriculture. So I believe that they both had really good points. And so here we have a Solomon's choice of how do we grow this so that it's food that's available to everybody. So it needs to not necessarily scale, but it needs to replicate a lot. And how do we keep it as a movement and keep our integrity?
And it needs to be a business in that people need to be able to make a living.
They need to make a living.
So I sort of err to the side of trying to find that balance between, and I feel like we do that. We see that on the national level, and we see that in the way we interpret the regulations. Is there's a side of, you know, we want to have this, we want to have integrity, we want things to be as pure as possible, but people are trying to run a business, and we can't create regulations that make it so hard that, you know, it's too difficult and you can't make any money. So there does have to be a balance. That balance is easier when you're dealing with, I think, producers that also really believe in the practices. So, you know, maybe less likely to want to take shortcuts, right? But
yeah.
But I still think it's important to like, those are conversations we have with our farmers all the time of like trying to be practical with how we're thinking about the practices that we're requiring.
And it's got to be a conversation that includes the eaters, because they have to care enough to want to choose the stuff that's been grown. I mean, that's the whole point. When we started, it was part of a big movement. It wasn't just about food. It wasn't just about organic. It was about everything. When I say we, organic has been around since, 1935 as a movement, as a political movement. But when it hit America and it hit the 60s and 70s, it changed. And it became kind of volcanic what happened. But that was part of a movement where we were questioning everything and saying we need to find a better way. I can't say we were totally successful in that, but that is the roots of organic in our country. That is what it meant.
And probably even beyond that were like, you know, movements from people earlier working with natural systems, Native Americans.
Sure.
Right.
For them, it wasn't a political movement. It was how they lived and how they farmed.
Cultural. Yeah. Right.
Organic farming has existed for thousands of years under many names.
Right.
Right. And there was also some bad agriculture traditionally too.
Right.
It wasn't all good.
That's so true. Yeah.
But there was some very high level agriculture that certainly we would all say that's real organic.
Right.
And I think that the thing that happened in Europe, it's not that the information came from Europe. Famously, Albert Howard was bringing it back from India. And in this country, F.H. King was bringing it back from China and Japan and Korea. So we were looking to the rest of the world for how to farm well. But what happened in Europe, and that was brought to America, is it became a political movement, saying, you know what, this chemical invasion is screwed up.
Right.
And we need to speak up against it. We need to create an alternative.
Right.
And I think that was the critical thing. that this was a political movement.
Yeah.
And I don't mean Democrats and Republicans. I mean, we need to speak out against something bad that's happening that profits a few and hurts the many.
Right. And then that chemical agriculture was also being brought to other countries in the world. And now that political movement is connecting on a global level too.
Very much.
Yeah. Yeah, that's one thing I would like to, that seems like a weakness for our organic program and our organic certification in the U.S. is that I wish we had more ties to other countries to better understand how they do things. And, those would be really interesting conversations and kind of like learning journeys to just benefit, to improve how we do things here by learning how folks are doing it in Europe and Mexico and Canada and India. And,
that's a great idea.
Yeah.
We should organize some of those.
I'd love to do that.
Yeah, we should do that.
Okay.
Obviously, Real Organic is connecting with people. The people are reaching out to us,
which is really cool. Yeah.
I'm having phone calls with people in China.
Wow.
Saying, we need the Real Organic project here. There's lots of organic, but it's not real. It's very corrupt. It's run by the government. Would you come and do this? And I said, no, I'm sorry. You need to do it. That's the whole point of what we're doing. I don't know. I don't even know what the word for organic is in Chinese. It's not organic. It's a different word. But you have something that's important, and it's threatened. And you need to, but I'll help you if we can. We'll help you organize. But in Australia, we hear from them a lot. They're fighting the battle there. Right now, there's a big group in Australia, big money, trying to get hydroponic as certified as organic. And they're going, well, the U.S. does it, right? So why can't we do it? And of course, the people who want it to be based in the soil are saying, the EU won't allow that. Why should we allow it? And they're talking to us because they understand that we're allies in this. Our actions in the U.S. are being used against the world organic movement.
Right. That's painful.
That's painful. Could you just tell me a little bit about Enid Wanakott? I thought Enid was just fantastic, and she died, and I'm so glad we got one interview with her before she died.
Yeah.
But could you tell me a little bit about Enid?
Sure. Enid, the lore is that Enid inherited NOFA as an organization as like a paper box with a couple files in it. And she really took it and grew it into, the successful organization that it is today. Even this building, that we're in, even this table right here, like this is all like Enid helping us, secure and become an organization that's really secure. So what was really important to Enid, and I think this is what she passed on to me, is that piece about listening to farmers and farmers being involved in the process. So she never wanted to be the type of certification program, or even on the work that she was doing on the NOFA side, someone who was, working in isolation, not really understanding the needs of farmers, or, talking down to them, or she really, wanted to make sure the work she was doing was relevant, and often went to farmers to talk to them to say, is this relevant? What do you think of this idea? And not, so there's that piece of her. And then also she was just a very warm and fun individual, right? So she was able to work really hard and play really hard. And she's also famous for her crazy slow hugs where she would hug you for until you started to feel a little uncomfortable. And then, and then she would let you go. But so she just had this way of creating community, and I think this is something that is a little special in Vermont because we're a small state, but amongst people who, creating community amongst people who might not agree on all the issues, but could probably find similar values, So that was, I think, what was some of the stuff that was really special about her.
Yeah. Well, I thought she was a special person and really great. And she did such a good job of continuing to build community, and I agree. She never left the farmers out. So she didn't wander that far from the roots. I see many nonprofits now are kind of wandering far from the roots, and she never let that happen. What's the relationship right now between NOFA, Vermont Organic Farmers, and the USDA? I mean, it's wild times, obviously, in the USDA right now.
Right now.
So let's go back a year and then we'll come to right now. What's the relationship with USDA and VOF?
Right. I mean, we're committed to working within the USDA system, right, and working to try to make improvements also. So, you know, I think we've had an administrator at National Organic Program for a long time, Dr. Jenny Tucker, who has done a really good job of, you know, making that program work smoothly, right? Whether you agree with like all of the things that, you know, she has done or valued, she has definitely been helpful about, she's really, I always felt that she was very good and very transparent about this is how the system works. And if you would like to get something changed, you know, here's here's the levers in some ways, right? She, I think, focused on things that the organic industry, including ourselves, were saying were problems. So there was the strengthening organic enforcement to, you know, try to address fraud in the industry. And there's also, we've recently had the Organic Livestock and Poultry Standards Act to improve animal welfare standards, which are both important. I don't know that they've had a huge impact as far as changes to practices that our farmers have done, but they have hopefully addressed fraud in areas where fraud needed to be addressed, right? So, you know, there are definitely things that we disagree with the NOP. Certifying, allowing the certification of hydroponics is definitely one of them. You know,
I think you asked her if, when she said that a 3-year transition was required for all crops that were grown on the land, including hydroponic crops, and you asked her, what does it mean on the land? And I think she refused to answer. I know she refused to answer me. She refused to answer the head of the NOSB, Harriet Behar. Yeah. I'm just curious, did she answer you?
I don't think so, but they don't answer those kinds of specific questions a lot. And sometimes that's good and sometimes that's bad, right? Because like I don't know that we want the National Organic Program and the folks in those roles making those kind of interpretation decisions as far as like, well, I guess partly because we're concerned with what their interpretation is going to be, right? And so typically when we ask a question, we usually say this is how we'd like this question to be answered, and then we give it to them packaged like that. So I don't know. I guess what am I trying to say here? That I think that there are some things about the NOP that I think are valuable. And I think that the public process and the requirement, the transparency in some ways, in some parts, is really important. Having said that, I know that there are workings behind the scenes that impact the program and what they're allowed to do that we don't see, that aren't transparent, that you know, aren't working in our favor or in the favor of small diversified operations, right, or farms in Vermont. So, like I said, I think one of the differences probably between VOF and ROP is maybe we're a little more. We haven't given up on the NOP. We still are trying to work within the system, even though we see areas that are failing and need improvement. And probably as a program, we distinguish ourselves from the USDA too, right? So we value USDA organic, but we get to say, since we only certify in Vermont, that we have a stronger standard because we get to have strong interpretations of the regulations.
Right. Okay, just before we leave, I'm curious, I really don't know this. Does Vermont Organic Farmers or NOFA get funding from USDA in any way?
From USDA?
Yeah.
Oh, yes. Yeah, we have some funding, like some federal grants from USDA.
Grants.
Yeah, because we have received funding from the Transition to Organic Partnership Program.
Yeah.
Mostly that funding is on the NOFA side, but some of it is for the educational work that we do on the VOF side.
Yeah.
And so we have. That's more recent.
Has that funding been suspended?
Not yet.
Not yet. Mm-hmm. Good. Congratulations.
Yeah. I mean, who knows what's going to happen.
Yeah.
But as far as if you were worried about a conflict of interest, we're probably paying the NOP more than we get. No, that's probably not true. But we do have to pay them for the auditing that when they audit us and when we send in our internal audits and that sort of thing.
So if they went away, I'm just kind of curious. I don't have an agenda here, but I'm curious if they went away. Would VOF, and assuming that farmers still want to get certified for something, and would NOFA kind of be unfazed? Or would you go, well, we're going to have to lay off a quarter of the people?
Oh, as far as funding?
Yeah.
No. VOF would not be, the vast majority of our funding comes from our certification program fees.
Right.
Yeah.
And we're losing, so this is something people don't necessarily know, but for now, because the Farm Bill has not been passed yet, we've lost the support for the certification.
The cost share fund.
The cost share, where they share the cost up to a small level. $750 maximum for farms.
Helping pay the certification fee back. Well, there's a little nuance there in that there are two pots of funding, and there is permanent funding that is available to 15 states, and Vermont is one of those states. And so cost share funding should theoretically be funded even when that funding that comes through the Farm Bill is not. Because we actually have an example of this from 7 years ago.
Right.
It's just so unclear now what will happen, but that's technically farmers in 2025 in Vermont should get cost share funding. I just don't feel very secure about that right now because everything seems so
was
unstable.
That something that Leahy pulled off?
Yes, it was through some crop insurance bill or something, and Leahy secured that.
Senator Pat Leahy, of course, was the Vermont senator who was the co-sponsor of the Organic Food Production Act.
Yep, and they called him the godfather of organic.
And the OFPA passed when you were still a kid, I guess. Mm-hmm. Right? It passed in 1990?
Yeah, in the 90s, right?
Yeah, and you were about 15.
Right.
Okay. I'm not a kid.
Yeah.
A young adult, very young adult. And so you weren't part of that with Kathleen Merrigan?
But Enid was part of that.
Enid was part of that.
Enid was, because prior to the National Organic Program, and you know this obviously, but I think this was something really special that Enid would always kind of wax poetic about and be nostalgic about, was that the farmers in Vermont used to come together to decide what the standards should be for defining organic production. And that was coming together in a room and sort of having a lively discussion about what should happen. And
I can testify, because I went to that every year. We all went to it every year. It was an important meeting.
Right.
It wasn't, I don't think I'll go to the annual meeting this year. It's no, we have to go.
You have to go, right.
Because we're going to vote on what our standards are.
Right.
And it was so nuanced. It was so informed. The audience was so informed. We would have impassioned conversations. It wasn't that everyone agreed.
Right.
There were some famous ones about Chilean nitrate.
Right.
There was one farm in particular that said, we'll go bankrupt without this. And the group voted, no, sorry, you can't. We don't consider that to be organic. So it wasn't that we disliked these people. It was a contentious issue.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And so one of the concerns, and Vermont was a state that wasn't supportive of, having organic move to a federal program.
Right.
But when it looked like it was going in that direction, then Enid was participating to make sure that the standards, that the Vermont farmers' voices were part of that national conversation about what the standards should be. But I always thought it was really interesting. Like, she told me a story about, Vermont used to allow the calves to be treated with antibiotics if they were 6 months or younger, because that's a vulnerable period for a calf, and they often get pneumonia, and an antibiotic is a great treatment for that. They're 2 years away from milking. It's a very reasonable, farmer-friendly standard. But when they were having that conversation on the national level, it was actually the milk buyers, who were saying this is it's a little too nuanced to market, right? It's easier to say no antibiotics allowed ever, and so that became the rule. So that's just kind of an interesting little example of when the farmers are out of the picture more, which was what's happening when it goes to the national level, because it's harder for farmers to get there versus meeting in Randolph in Vermont.
Right.
So
I supported that limited use of antibiotics, as I do for myself and my children.
Right.
And obviously the wholesale use as just give them all a shot, because they put on weight faster.
Right.
I don't support.
Right.
In the EU, they allowed the limited use of antibiotics for animals also.
Right.
So that's interesting. I hadn't heard why that got.
Yeah. That's what Enid told me.
That makes sense to me. Okay. So I actually thought that they wrote a great law. I mean, it was a pretty amazing document, really.
Yeah, it really is. It's a very progressive document, especially for the time, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, and it still is.
Still
right?
is.
Yeah.
There's the problem is the interpretation of
right.
it has been
right.
difficult.
Yes.
Okay.
And there are examples, Dave, the law. And there have been improvements, right? So the law used to say that a significant amount of a ruminant's diet should come from pasture.
Yeah.
And that was, people were, that term significant was too loose, right? And I can understand that. And so that's when the pasture rule got tightened up with numbers of this 30% dry matter intake from pasture. I do think we should acknowledge that it is imperfect, but it's actually a pretty amazing process that, there's a public meeting twice a year, or there used to be, where people come together and are pretty much replicating what was happening in Vermont on that farmer scale. The problem now, I suppose, is these pressures of larger industries that have more influence, right?
Those meetings, the National Organic Standards Board meetings, most of the people testifying are not from farmer groups or farmers. They're mostly lobbyists for people who want something to be approved. And of course, it's a business thing. It's hard for farmers to get away. Mm-hmm. I was amazed the first one of those I went to the National Organic Coalition meeting the day before. And I'm like, who are these people? They're all sitting around this big table and they're nicely dressed and they're obviously mostly our friends. And they knew each other very well. They've been coming to these meetings twice a year for years. They know each other. It's a social occasion. But I had never met any of them.
Right.
And I'm like, I didn't know all this was going on.
And that's a problem.
I was fairly deep into organic.
Right. Yeah.
I wasn't an activist in that sense. I farmed.
Right.
But anyway, I was quite surprised.
Right. And so maybe that's part of the solution, right? Is getting more farmer voice. If we want the National Organic Program to be successful, it would be getting more farmer voice involved there, or more farmer involvement.
Yeah.
Figuring out a way to do that.
It's hard.
It's hard.
Of course, we did that in Jacksonville. We had 60
Right.
farmers fly in from around the country, and they were completely ignored by the National Organic Standards Board.
I'm saying different structure, regional meetings that then report, a structural change to ensure that farmer voice is.
But the challenge here, Nicole, is that even if the National Organic Standards Board did listen,
right.
the USDA doesn't listen to them.
Right.
They ignore their recommendations.
Right.
It's
Or they
wonderful
have it a
that we
couple
have
times. Yeah.
this, well, more than a couple, 20 recommendations over 10 years were not acted on, which is all of the recommendations for a decade. This is from the Organic Trade Association. Were not acted on.
Yeah.
And it's pretty bad. And if they do act on them, they're so watered down by the time they come out as to not have much meaning.
Yeah. No, I know. I think that's totally valid, and I think some of the recommendations are tough too.
Yeah.
You know.
Like the one against hydroponics.
That one, that one should have passed, right?
That one should have been acted on.
Right.
It did pass.
Right.
Okay. So you have been a core organizer of the Soil Working Group, and nobody knows what that is. I know what it is, so why don't you tell us about it?
Okay, so the Soil Working Group is a very informal but committed meeting of certifiers and other organizations that feel very strongly that hydroponics shouldn't be allowed to be certified organic. So hydroponic operations shouldn't be allowed to be certified organic. And we were coming together as a bunch of different organizations, a bunch of busy individuals, trying to figure out how to move that concept forward. You know, how to talk to consumers about it, how to affect change on the national level, and how to get other certifiers on board or involved, or seeing who else is out there and whether there's any compromise in the certifier world for this issue. So I think, we're trying our best. We meet once a month, and
we met today. Yeah. As one person put it, well, if nothing else, this is group therapy, because
we felt like that today.
We need it. Yeah, I know. Yeah. People are feeling a little shell-shocked.
Yeah.
So there was actually a resolution passed.
So the
by
first
this
thing
group?
that we did was part of the conversation that's been had amongst certifiers is that there isn't like a shared policy for or narrative about why we don't certify hydroponics as organic. So we tried, and then there's a lot of conversation about, well, what about certifying mushrooms? Like, what about potted plants? Like, where would this all fit in? How would you handle these? Sort of the logic of what you certify and what you don't certify. So we worked together to kind of put a policy together to outline those things, and then and then all signed on and say, like, this is kind of, I suppose, our stance and what we believe in and why we're not certifying hydroponics. And for VOF, that was in our guidelines book since I started, and obviously it was in there before, but it was just always a tenet that said very clearly in our guidelines that we won't certify hydroponics.
Right, yeah. So you put this out as a public proclamation to the world. I think now there are 10 certifiers, 10 USDA accredited certifiers who have signed on to this, and they certify, I believe, over 8,000 operations between them, which is a lot of operations. Mm-hmm. So this isn't just a small, Vermont 700 farms. God bless Vermont, because their impact is far greater than 700 farms. But, this is, I think, a fifth of the certified operations, certified by the USDA. And there are many other operations under other certifiers who agree with this completely. Right. I would say the vast majority of farmers agree with this. But this was a heroic thing where certifiers who have a business relationship with the USDA, and if that relationship is destroyed, your certifying agency is out of business. If they say, because of what you're saying, you're out of here. Mm-hmm. It's a scary thing. Right. Right? Right. And in fact, one of the certifiers was given a non-compliance because they said, we won't certify hydroponic because we think it's illegal.
Yeah.
and that was one cert. And you know, they're very open about it.
Yep.
And was that any sense of collective security of coming together like this, or I felt that if people could come together, they would be safe from that, because is the USDA going to say all 10 of you are decertified?
Right.
I don't think so, but they might say it to one.
Right. Yeah. So I think there is some power in coming together and saying this is what we believe, and this is why we don't certify these types of operations.
Yeah.
And I think, you know, something that we don't do well, but and partially I suppose it's because we don't have the time and capacity, but is to, you know, I think that there are more certifiers out there who would join the meeting and the group, but just trying to figure out how to do that has been hard for us because of the other work that we do.
Yeah,
right?
So much work.
Yeah.
Well, you know, maybe Real Organic can help with that. We're a part of the group. We're the one non-USDA certifier. We're not a certifier.
Right.
We do an add-on.
You
label.
and Cornucopia.
And
right?
well, now Cornucopia, but in the beginning, it was a small group,
it was.
And you very nicely invited me to join.
We did.
Yeah, and I thank
Partly
you.
because I think we felt like we needed some organizations that weren't certifiers, because I think we can do our part by saying, hey, we're not going to certify these operations, but I think we needed some assistance and need some assistance in how to expand that movement.
Yeah. Well, certainly we're so much stronger when we come together. It's the only way.
It's the only way. Yep, that's true.
We're getting towards the end, but there's something I wanted to ask you about. You've become actually an eloquent champion of small is beautiful. You might not think of it that way, but I've heard you speak now a number of times about the need to address monopoly in our food system, and that so much of the damage that is done is because of consolidation of power into a few hands, and that's why we struggle with the National Organic Program. I mean, why is it that there's any contention about hydroponic, or we didn't even get into grain fraud, or CAFOs, and I think because there's a lot of money involved, a lot of money now. So do you want to share any thoughts about that?
I mean, honestly, I wish that I could speak more eloquently about it. I just think the part of the issue is that, I mean, I think most Americans would want more competition amongst businesses, but I think what's happening is with the consolidation of agriculture and certain businesses holding all the power, controlling the prices of things, controlling what goes into the grocery stores, like that, it really hinders the competition of all the small, medium-sized businesses, right? And that's where that's the problem. And I think that's kind of an un-American ideal and value. But, unfortunately, it seems like our judicial system has sort of said, well, if the prices are cheaper for consumers, then it's not a monopoly, right?
Actually, that wasn't the judicial system that said that. That was the executive branch.
Executive branch.
That was under Ronald Reagan. It was Robert Bork who issued that new policy that they were no longer going to interpret the antitrust laws to be about a protection of democracy.
It's an interpretation of the regulation.
It's going to be about a protection of the consumer.
Right.
Very different from the way the law was written.
Right. And so that, I think, is affecting all of our small businesses. Like, can people make a living anymore on the land with a small farm operation? Like, that's what doesn't seem to be working, and so I wish in some ways I wish I did understand it better, but I think like the costs are such that the costs keep going up for our small farms, and they're not able, and so I guess that's it. The costs are going up for the small farms, right? And then they're competing price-wise with what looks like the same product, but is produced vastly different, right? So it's like, how does Dave's tomato, how can it be produced at the same price as what's coming from Mexico in these like huge greenhouses without any soil, right?
Yeah.
It's not the same product, and yet they're competing at the same price point.
And without any labor laws,
Right.
without any environmental laws.
Right.
Yeah, yeah.
So it's stifling the competition, like it's putting out of business our small operations, and they can't compete.
Yeah.
But it's not the same product. They really shouldn't be competing with these huge monopolies, right? So.
Yeah. Well, that's our work for the next generation.
Right, absolutely.
And the rest of our generation,
Right.
you know, we have work to do here.
And I think the problem was that organic for a long time was a home for the small producer where they didn't have to compete with the large industrial farms. And once those large industrial farms came into organic, that's when things got complicated.
Yeah.
And unfair.
Good. All right, Nicole, before we close, I always ask people, is there anything else you'd like to say, you know, something I didn't ask or something that you just think is important for people to think of?
Well, I would say I don't want people to lose faith in the organic label, but I do think that people need to pay attention to it and tend to it a little, you know. So I don't think we should stop buying organic product, but I think we should be trying to support, you know, paying attention to what types of organic product we are buying. And so that is the role that Real Organic Project plays. And, you know, I would also stand by all of the products that we certify as Vermont Organic Farmers too. So. Yeah,
me too. Good. I think Real Organic is just an attempt to connect all the people who really care, which is not just in one state, and we need each other.
Yeah.
Emily Oakley's famous line, Vermont can do it without Oklahoma, but Oklahoma can't do it without Vermont. And which is why we became a national organization. So I actually don't think Vermont can do it without Oklahoma.
I don't think either. Yeah.
I think that we're all in this together.
Right.
We are. But okay, Nicole Dehne, thank you so much.
Thanks, Dave. Thanks for having me.
Thank you for listening to the Real Organic Podcast. Our movement is growing because you're subscribing and sharing these podcasts with your friends. So keep it up and leave us a rating and a review as well so that others can find us. You can find a video version of this interview on our newly designed website, realorganicproject.org, or on our YouTube channel. And you can join us every Thursday for a new episode featuring voices from the organic movement. See you next time.